Okay, thanks to Adam and the panelists for a fascinating discussion on sensors. What is going to power all of these billions of connected devices that they were talking about? Energy. And that's what we're here to talk about. The pace of change in the world of energy is pretty radical itself. If you consider a few facts, in less than a decade, the oil production in the United States has doubled. Since 2006, the price of solar cells has come down something like 85%. We're seeing companies like Uber and Lyft and Zipcar radically changing the way transportation happens in cities, like San Francisco, where there's a lot of talk about driverless cars. And in the background, we have increasingly alarming data about climate change to factor into all of this. So the energy equation is definitely changing, and to examine how and what the effects of that are going to be, we're lucky to have two major figures in driving these changes. Let's call them the Browne brothers. That makes me Harriman. That's a banking joke. Banking jokes. Next time I won't try that. So to my right, we have Governor Edmund G. Browne Jr., Jerry Browne, who was the 34th governor of California and is currently the 39th governor of California.
My father was the 32nd.
Right. Keeping it in the family. Current term started in 2011. And to his right, we have John Browne, Lord Browne of Mattingly, who says I can call him John so that you don't think his name is Lord. He spent 4 decades at BP and served as CEO from 95 to 2007. Currently, he's the executive chairman of L1 Energy, a new oil and gas venture, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But I'm going to start with Governor Browne. In October, just a few weeks ago, California passed a law, SB 350, which requires 50% of electric power in the state to be supplied by renewables by 2030, and requires that buildings double their energy efficiency by 2030. How is this law going to help change the energy equation in California, and how quickly will these effects take hold, do you think?
Well, I'd say rather rapidly. First of all, I want to say about Senate Bill 350. It took a year to pass it. A comparable bill of that magnitude might take 7 to 10 years in Washington. So this was a very impressive movement through the legislature. The goal of 50% renewable electricity is certainly in reach. The current rate is about 25% statewide. San Diego Electric Company is 40% already. So, and I would say just a couple of years ago, the utilities, the electric utilities in California, private-only utilities, we can't get to 20% by 2020, but they got there and beyond. Interestingly and importantly, they were sponsors of Senate Bill 350, so everybody was on board. And we'll get there. We're not going to wait till 330. We'll have 40% by maybe 2022, 2023. We have interim goals. We're increasing the efficiency of our buildings. They're already the most efficient buildings in the country, and that's another example. Things don't get done overnight. I was governor the first time, started the Energy Commission in January of '75, and the building energy efficiency standards were not ready to go for 9 years. So that was 1983. So it takes time, but I've been working at this for 40 years. And many of the people who work in our Energy Commission, the Public Utilities Commission, Independent System Operator, were there at least 35 years ago. So there is a continuity, and we are riding this wave of investment and innovation. We use a lot of oil in California, 18 billion gallons a year, and we're cutting that down slowly but surely. So I would say California, oh, by the way, our economy is growing faster than the national average. So we have a cap and trade program. We have a lot of things we put into place, and yet it is stimulating the economy, not interfering with it.
California's economy is the 7th largest economy in the world. I want to congratulate you for, I think you just recently passed Brazil to move back.
We did, but I think they caught up with us again, so we're back to 8.
You got to keep fighting.
But it's close, and who knows what's going on in Brazil.
That's true. The oil industry, oil and gas industry is a big part of the economy here in
Yes.
California. It has been for a long time. You've been aggressive saying you're going to take the fossil fuels out of our lives and out of the economy. How does that go over with Chevron and some of your other California companies?
We know from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that probably 40% of the known reserves of oil have to stay in the ground. And so that, I don't really even remember that quote, but we're not going to get rid of something tomorrow. As a matter of fact, in California, there's been a lot of pressure for me to stop fracking. And I've said, no, we're going to take out the oil in the most efficient way possible, but we are transitioning to a decarbonized future. And we want to get there as quickly as we can, and that'll probably take a carbon price, and it will take a lot of R&D and a lot of political will. But the companies will adapt. One thing we can see, you're not just in the oil business, you're in the energy business. And some of the companies had more investments in renewables, they dropped it. They're going to have to get back into that or go into some other kind of business, but they've got time. We have a lot of time, but there's a lot of resistance. The majority in the Congress don't want to do anything about climate change, but I don't think that's going to stick because the science is overwhelming, the worldwide momentum is building, Paris is real. So all industries, look, taxi cabs in San Francisco have to react to Uber. We're not here to keep somebody going forever. The buggy whips were passed by cars. So oil and gas brought us to where we are. It brought us here today. I was in a car, it was oil and gas. Okay, that is the basis of our whole prosperity, and I thank them for that. But that doesn't mean that's where we're going over the next 50 years. So we got to change quickly, and we're doing that in California, full speed ahead.
When is the governor of California getting an electric car?
That's a good question. I'm driving. When I was governor the first time, I drove a blue 1975 Plymouth for 8 years. I got 240,000 miles on it. I was kind of proud of that. So I have a certain frugality. I'm driving a Crown Vic, which they don't make anymore. And part of me wants to drive it till it drops or I drop. But when we get the thing down a little closer, I'm not buying a luxury car, but I want to have maybe in the next year or two.
All right, well, let's turn to Lord Browne. I think that was a good moment to transition when Governor Browne said we need to leave 40% of the resources in the ground. In 1997, not that far from here, in a speech at Stanford, you became the first big oil CEO to acknowledge that man-made carbon emissions contributed to climate change. Not long after that, you changed BP's tagline to Beyond Petroleum, which was mocked by some people, and you've said it was a mistake. Maybe it was too fast, too soon to try to push that. But we are clearly not beyond petroleum now. But how much closer are we? Where have we come from then in the late 90s when you started this conversation among big oil companies to moving beyond it?
So I think the world is in two different speeds. There's the world where people need to still develop. There's a lot of poverty. And people will still use a lot of hydrocarbons, and they will build their future based on hydrocarbons because they'll be brought out of poverty that way. There's the richer world where things are changing very quickly. Every year, OECD uses less oil. Gas has become something which is available everywhere. So the energy mix, which is happening in the world, is generally getting lighter when it comes to carbon. It doesn't mean to say that that's the solution, but the balance of carbon in the making of energy is going down in the developed world, in the rich world. It's changing, it's not doing that in the world which is still developing. So what do we have to do? Seems to me we need to continue the changing of the energy mix with alternative energies, with storage, with different ways of using natural gas in preference to oil. And we then have to figure out how to capture the CO2 that's made from burning hydrocarbons that we still have to burn. And we can capture it, and we can use it or store it. So all of this will take a lot of work to get right, but this work is beginning. It's not hopeless, but by no means is it at the right level yet. Innovation is needed.
I just want to remind everyone, we're going to have a chance to open this up for questions in a few minutes, so be thinking of questions. Following up, though, for the past 8 years, one of the many things you've been doing has been running a large private equity fund devoted to investing in renewable energy. So, and you recently left earlier this year to start up a new $10 billion venture backed by Russian billionaires' money to build a new oil and gas company. So one of my questions about that is, why make that change now? Why leave renewable energy to build a new oil and gas company now? Why not a new solar company or a driverless car company?
Well, I ran the world's largest, I think, renewable energy fund. It was about $10 billion in total. One of the great parts of that was Pattern Energy, which is headquartered in the state, of which I'm still a director. So I'm very pleased still to be involved, and it's a very important wind and solar company. But I think all forms of energy go hand in hand. It's a matter of what is the mix, how is it changing over time? And as the governor said, and I completely agree, there will be a change, but it takes a long time to make this change, a long time. Infrastructure change takes time, and we still have to wait till the speed of the world, the different speeds of different parts of the world come together a bit more, because they will need hydrocarbons. So I think they go hand in hand. It's not to say that I've forsaken, quite the reverse. I still believe that a lot more work is needed in the alternative energy space. I recently co-authored a paper for Paris, which said that without a tenfold increase in the level of R&D in alternative energy, we really won't make the breakthroughs that we need to make alternative energy ubiquitously available. We spend, as a world, pitifully small amounts of money in R&D. On solar, it's $1.5 billion around the whole world. That should be $15 billion. For renewable energy, it's $6 billion around the world. It should be maybe not 60, but maybe 30 billion. And this will require some state support, there is no doubt about it, to defray the risk that other people, the private sector cannot take on. So this work needs yet to be done.
I do want to say something about long time, long, short. The time is short. The climate disruption will be real. The migration mess in Europe, it could be just the beginning of what could happen if Africa becomes unlivable or producing crops becomes extremely difficult. I mean, even if I read it right, David Carney, the director of the Bank of England, said that by the time the oil companies figure out their stranded assets, the financial crisis will be,
that's correct.
Horrible. So we've got to move pretty fast.
I agree with that.
And at the same time, right, we don't have enough money, but Russia and the United States are about to enter a new nuclear arms race that's going to cost many, many billions of dollars every year. So I think we've got to get our priorities right. Where's the risk? What's the path forward? And it's going to take a lot of collaboration to get where we need to go.
But it needs to be collaboration around the world, and hopefully one of the outcomes of Paris might be, after these agreements between nations are made, or these soft agreements, that there may be something to do with more global approaches to R&D. I agree. The time appears to be long, but it's not. In order to get things done, we need to make up for some lost time that we could have otherwise used to develop new ways of producing energy.
I'd like to get to any questions or give our audience a chance to ask questions if we have any. We have one right here. Please remember to identify yourself.
Hi, I'm Bill Antholis from the University of Virginia. Congratulations to you both. Thanks for coming. As we move quickly into this future to try to bring, to decarbonize the economy, on the one hand, we have states like California moving very aggressively, and some provinces in China and India doing the same. On the other hand, you have other provinces, states, localities moving slower. And I'm just wondering, both from a business standpoint and a government standpoint, does the complexity and great number of different regulatory approaches pose a problem or an opportunity?
I think for business it's inevitably just very complicated because every state, that is every nation, has different approaches to this, and there's no unified way, whether it is through policy instruments or through taxation or even a trading market for carbon. There are different incentives in play here, and sometimes they produce the wrong results. So for example, in Germany, where there's been a tremendous push on the installation of renewable energy, the amount of coal being burnt has risen because nuclear power is not available, has been taken out of the system. So there are plenty of complexities in this anyway, nation by nation, and certainly across the world, tremendously complex. I think Europe has seen the complexity in having a trading market for carbon, which has in reality produced the wrong result. It's too cheap. So it's not creating the right incentive for people to pull back from the use of carbon. So that has to be rethought, and maybe carbon taxes are probably the simpler way of putting this in place, but not very popular with heavy energy users.
You know, one of the key pathways is to reduce short-lived climate pollutants. That's soot, or black carbon, HFCs, methane, oxides of nitrogen, and ozone. These are what cause health damage. It's what's causing the pollution in New Delhi and Beijing and Shanghai. So there's a real motive to curb that. And that's curbing conventional pollutants that will also dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions and give us more time to get the benefit of the R&D.
I mean, I think the governor's right. You know, if there were, I'm often asked, what should the oil and gas industry do specifically in the area of trying to reduce carbon? One is to work much harder on how to use carbon dioxide as well as to store it away when it's captured. And secondly, how to take all and every steps to reduce the leakage of methane, natural gas, into the atmosphere, which is a very powerful greenhouse gas, and all that requires much more work at the R&D level.
Both of you have mentioned the upcoming climate talks in Paris. Governor Browne, you've co-founded an organization to create memorandums of understanding on subnational governments to make pledges to reduce greenhouse gases, and you've joined the carbon pricing panel California has. And you mentioned the paper you submitted calling for more R&D. Are you both hopeful that we're going to come out of these talks, that the whole world is going to be watching this? Are we going to come out with concrete progress, unlike 6 years ago, the last time we had these talks, and nothing really came of it?
I think if I've not misread the approach that the host, the French government, are taking, is to be quite modest in the expected outcomes, which is to get everyone to make effectively their voluntary contribution stated, and then to allow peer pressure to see if these can actually be implemented in an appropriate way, because there's no global enforcement which is possible. So I think that's their first step, and after that, I think they're thinking there may be some practical implementation steps.
I don't have an organization exactly. I just started calling up a number of other subnational governments, provinces, states, Washington, Oregon, Quebec, Ontario, Rhineland-Westphalia, all sorts of 49 in all, and it's still growing, to get subnational jurisdictions to sign on to the under 2 MOU. That's each person emitting no more than 2 tons per year, and to keep the temperature from not rising beyond 2 degrees centigrade from the Industrial Revolution. We're making progress, and I think the science is becoming clear enough, and the pricing. You look at the price of coal has dropped 90%. I was just speaking with some people who think that's going to happen. Well, it's already happened to oil for a lot of complex reasons, but the world is moving. Battery technology is advancing. Whether it's 5 years or 8 years or 10 years, the turn is obvious, and the market will anticipate that, and I think that's going to shove us in the right direction.
It's natural gas that have pushed coal out of the system.
Push coal out of the system.
As well as regulation, of course.
Going from 50% to 39% in the United States.
And of course, very inexpensive as a selling price. But the real price of coal should surely include the cost of the carbon emitted and also the health effects which come out of sorting.
If you priced it properly, the transition would even be faster, because now the price of solar is 4 cents when it's a utility scale. So a lot of things are happening, and you've got efficiency, which is a big winner. You save money. I mean, California saved tens of billions because of these building efficiency standards. So there's a lot of things we can do if we put our mind to it. And there's a lot of other distractions out there that have everybody very excited. But we've got to get focused on this to get it done, and I think we can. And Paris is getting people mobilized in a very, I think, serious way.
The other thing that's upon us here in the U.S. is the presidential election cycle. So I wanted to ask you, Governor Browne, which of the Republican candidates' energy plans are you most impressed with so far?
Absolutely none of the above. Completely in the dark, they make no sense to me. And I speak from the experience of the California economy growing and a program starting under Republicans, continuing under my administration. So I think they're not honest about climate change, and I think they're unrealistic about where the world is going.
If you were running for president...
By the way, it isn't just that. It's not just climate change. It's gay rights. It's immigration. And, you know, these are serious matters. And besides that, we're not fixing our roads. And we got to fix our roads, and it's going to take some money. And they can't even get that done. We're not even getting it done in California either. We've got to get serious and build the stuff that needs to be built. R&D, roads, basic infrastructure, water, all important stuff. And you can't just say we want a little government. Building a road takes a big operation. And that's true of a lot of things. Same with research.
I wanted to, we're kind of running down on time, but we have a lot of CEOs of companies here, and we've only sort of scratched the surface of all the things that are going on in the energy world. And but just if you had some advice, I'd like to ask each of you, what's the most important takeaway that everyone here should take away about the change that's going to be coming in energy and what they need to know to operate their businesses, and maybe to operate their businesses in California, in your case, but maybe I'll start with you, John.
I think there's a universal law in business, which is efficiency really matters, operational efficiency really matters, and energy efficiency really matters. Because energy efficiency, the output per unit of energy, will control the output of carbon, but more importantly, as carbon is priced, the cost of energy is likely to rise. And so as an input, as a factor of production, it's got to be thought about very, very carefully. And that, I think, is the thing, is mix the energies, make them more efficient. And the advice to the oil and gas industry is I do hope that they will do something to really connect back with society, and not be known as the people who pushed back against what was right for the world, but actually lent into solving the problem. And they can do that with R&D and efficiency.
Governor Browne?
I'd say just pay attention to the science, because it is very complex. And also pay attention to the rising generation. People take climate change very seriously, and so does China, and so is the president. And this could be another basis for countries of the world collaborating on a common existential threat. So it is serious. Got to watch out for the stranded assets. It's not rhetoric, just careful science from all the national academies, from all the major countries. So I think you just have to stay awake, take advantage of the opportunities, and yeah, efficiency, waste is never good, and that's a big part of our challenge, getting more out of stuff than we currently do. And so we reduce the material impact on the world.
Great. I think we're going to have to leave it there on that note of making more of the stuff we have. And thanks so much for joining me. Please join me in welcoming Governor Browne and Lord Browne.